I'm very honored to present Professor Iain Stewart to you, someone who has applied his life and research, or has dedicated his life and research to applying earth sciences to pressing societal concerns. Professor of Geoscience Communication at Plymouth University, someone who's internationally recognized with the El Hassan Research Chair for Sustainability and the UNESCO Chair for Geoscience and Society. He's someone who sports probably the coolest epithet in sciences, dubbed geology's rock star, a title that he's been awarded amongst other achievements by being the presenter of several documentary series for BBC, among which the BAFTA-nominated Earth, the Power of the Planet, in which he traces the origins of our planet Earth throughout 4.6 billion years of history. Within the context of that series, he traveled from the Jacobshaven Glacier to the heart of the Amazon forest, but today he's here with us in Ghent to elaborate on how to make academic know-how fit for broadcasting purposes. Iain, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks very much. I'm going to try to give you a provocation today. I'm really, I think I'm really conscious of who we have, at home and here, in terms of early career researchers that are starting out on a research path, thinking of their future career, but also with the expectation of this new thing that I didn't have when I was a PhD student, of an expectation to communicate beyond my research, beyond the kind of hallowed halls of academia. And I take the cue from the thing here about, that Ghent's mission is this business about solutions for tomorrow's challenges. And really that brings me to, what these challenges are. These challenges are going to be complicated, multifaceted, interdisciplinary, ethical, moral challenges. They're unlikely to just be technical. And I think that's broadening the range of the importance of communication. This here is the Altiplano in Bolivia, and that is the most amazing place, but it's also home to 30% of the world's lithium supplies. And so as we move to a low carbon future and electric vehicles and renewables and all the rest of it that rely on light metals like lithium, the challenge to avoid digging places like that up are really difficult. And as I say, there'll be moral, ethical as much as technical challenges. So in terms of communication, the standard view of communication is there's two ways, the yin and the yang. One is, so if we look at the motivation of scientists, and that vertical axis, they're driven by curiosity, wanting to just discover pure science things, or you're interested in solving society's problems. And then along the horizontal, it's the extent to which the actual public, the end user, whatever, is actually involved in the research. And so if you're in that, most academics occupy that bottom corner, left-hand corner, interested in educating the public about science, telling them, explaining to them about the science that they do because they think it's a useful, meaningful thing to do. And then on the other side, up the top right there, is just public engagement, just outreach, just getting the public interested in science, pulling them into our scientific world and telling them it's a kind of cool, interesting things to do. So in science communication jargon, we tend to call the bottom one the deficit model. The assumption is that the public have a deficit of knowledge, and our job is to help them improve that. Or the dialogue model, which is just that we're having a conversation with the public about this. First thing to say about science communication is it's fantastic. There's loads of stuff that you can do out there in terms of science communication. This is my kind of landscape of it. Again, you get academic articles and conferences. You can argue about whether we think that's science communication or not. But then, you can see some very familiar things there, writing a popular science magazine, public talk, doing a little video and putting it onto YouTube. We've all got our phones in our pockets. We can do that in an instant. And then drifting across, you might end up making television shows. Video games, for example, is really coming in now as a way to try and communicate science. And then you go all the way across to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, etc., the public sphere that scientists occupy. And then just on Twitter, an interesting thing that, now a lot of scientists that are on Twitter are getting directly connected into journalists who are completely circumventing the normal press teams and all the rest of it, talking directly to scientists about things. So it's a new landscape, really, just in the last few years, particularly with social media. The other thing that's changed is the academic landscape. So this is the kind of standard knowledge production process, by which down in that bottom corner is publications. You know, that's what we're driving. That's what your supervisors are kind of asking you to, you know, get a publication, go to conferences, put in research proposals. That is the currency of academia. And that's referred to as mode 1. Mode 2 is when the science is getting more directed by public needs, by societal needs. And so you're feeling that you're doing research, but you're doing it with one eye, if you like, on the public. But then right out there, you'll see post-normal science. And post-normal science is much more to do with tomorrow's challenges. It's recognizing that the challenges of tomorrow are really super complicated. They're wicked problems, interconnected, not easy to address in simple ways. And so way out there, one of the things that you need with post-normal science is you need to have the public on board, because a lot of the decisions are these moral, ethical decisions that you need public endorsement for. So the stakeholders have to be involved in the process. And I think that what that's doing is it's changing the nature of what science communication is or could be. So what I mean by that is I'm going to talk about this in a slightly different way from normal. So on the left, there is that model of PUS, public understanding of science, beautifully named, public engagement, bringing them in, and public actions, so actually working with the public on helping them do things, if you like. And I'm going to refer to it by marketing paradigms, because actually one of the things that we find is that increasingly the scientist, the researcher, is at the interface between the organization, the university, and the people out there. So that you're the gateway, the portal into a lot of the stuff that happens here. Now, in a business sense, the role of that interface is the marketer. Now, you might not like the idea that you're a marketer or you're a marketing commodity for the university, but that's one of the roles that you potentially function. So one aspect of marketing, the simplest one, is making something and selling it. It's been done for centuries. You have an idea of something, you build it, you get your raw ingredients, you get them as cheaply as you can, you make it as efficiently as you can, you have a product, and you sell it out the door. Your customer didn't ask for it to be made, you made it, and you think it's a really good product, and if you've made it right, someone will buy it. That's make and sell. In the 1950s, that was added to by marketers who came along and said, hey, look, it's not about the product, it's about the customer. You need to understand your customer. If you can understand your customer, you can change your product. You can make it better fitted to what your customer wants. So it was all about really trying to understand subdivisions of customers. And that involved a lot of input from the social and behavioral sciences, psychology, sociology, etc. Marketing, as done in business schools. And then finally, the last one there, guide and co-create, is a marketing paradigm that's really emerged in the last 10 years or so with social and ethical marketing around companies that are really pushing their social purpose. That they say, we're a good company. This is your Unilevers, your Patagonias, your Innocent Drinks, your Ben & Jerry's. They say, trust us, we're a good company. We've got environmental ideals. And if you like us, buy our products, but follow us. And because we get a sense of direction. And so that's a different set of things around how you build a participatory, reaching out and doing to build a community essentially around something. So let me go through these, because the reason why I'm saying it is because one of the key things I think is we often don't ask ourselves is, what kind of communicator do I want to be? We're going to talk a lot today about science communication, particularly with science journalism and things like that. But that's not everything. So just to, this is the make and sell. The basic premise is that the reason that people aren't following science is because they don't have enough information. Therefore, our job is to provide them with that information. And science communication was done better, then the public and politicians out there would more fall into line with the way that we think about the world. We don't have much time, so I'm just going to go to the skills part, really. So what is the skills? Well, it's things about talking in plain English, understanding narrative and storytelling, imagery, being able to understand the media system, how a journalist works, how a news system works, how the social media works. When's the best time to tweet? When's the best time to, you know, if you put a blog, how do you do that? Media training, again, within the universities, often you get press teams that will train you to engage with journalists, and then also produce your own creative content. There's no reason why you can't pick up your smartphone, start making videos, put them onto YouTube, and have your own YouTube channel. But all of that is kind of one way. It's from you as the scientist projecting out what you're interested in to this wider kind of public. And so the interactions that you have on the bottom right there are to do with the media intermediaries, which could be the press teams. It could be journalists themselves, and I say with Twitter and things like that. Often we are talking directly to journalists, or to, you know, like policy units within our particular science organization. What about, so just to go back to that I've made my kind of 15, 20-year career on that, basically, making and sell, taking the kind of science journalists, popular science writing kind of ideas, putting it into television and selling it on television. The public never asked for me to make a television program about the geology, but I made one and I delivered it to them and they liked it, and I did another one, etc. But the point was that no one asked them about it. I just decided, well, I didn't quite decide, but the point was that was coming from me. Sense and respond is this flip side where you actually talk about audience. Now, anyone in the media knows their audience they're trying to reach really clearly. But academics, we tend to just have this message that we send out. We talk about the public. There isn't the public. There's a whole lot of different publics. Which public are we interested in? That's what sense and respond really looks at. It's based on the premise that actually that idea that we had in make and sell, it doesn't work. The information and facts isn't the thing that actually makes people make decisions. It's their gut instinct. It's their intuitive feeling about something, their emotional connection to something that actually drives that. So and the point is that there's this whole science to that, particularly in the social sciences and behavioral sciences, and to some extent in the humanities and the creative arts. So that the skill sets there is understanding how people process information. If you can understand how people take on information, what are the barriers to people taking on information, you can tweak your messaging to kind of get around that. So understanding how people think is a really critical part. Understanding your audience. How do you decide who your audience is, and how you segment that, and how you decide that's the audience that's really influential and that's the audience I'm going to go for. It's all about understanding networks, and fundamentally it's interdisciplinary working. You can't do the sense and respond without working across disciplinary boundaries, and so it's a kind of step up from that first one where you don't need to involve others. So that's what it says about the interactions with the creative arts and media to try and find new outlets to reach your audience, understanding the social science to understand really what's ticking inside their heads, what their mental models are by which you can get to them, and thinking about, because of the importance of culture and worldviews and values, you know, even engaging with ethics and philosophy and religion to try to think of different ways to reach people at the emotional level rather than just at the intellectual level. And I just wanted to finish with the one that I think is really interesting, is this one about more social purpose. Because I think this is the one that we're really needing to address tomorrow's challenges, which is, what is the purpose of what we're doing? Why are we doing it? What's the long-term objective? So that's about you, and I would argue your institution or your research group or who you work, having a long-term motivating vision of why you do what you do. And at the same time, thinking about the people you need to reach and bringing them in, co-creating that communication journey with them. And that whole idea of having a kind of a long-term enduring motivating goal is the idea of purpose. And business now, all of this latest thing in business, all businesses are becoming purpose-led businesses, because purpose goes right through an organization. It's not a person in an organization that doesn't know what the purpose of their organization is. So if you go to the skill sets, what is it? Well, it's those interpersonal skills, because you're trying to bring people in much more closely. Empathy, authentic listening, not just setting up listening to pretend so that you could just know them better and then tell them things. Actually listening to what people have got to say, thinking about it and thinking, actually, maybe I need to change what my communications are, because this is, I know what's needed. Dialogic communication. Understanding the roles of participatory work. So how do you facilitate engagement? How do you conciliate between people who have different viewpoints? A whole load of stuff around self-reflection, thinking about, is this the right knowledge that I'm putting across? What about their knowledge? How do I bring their knowledge into the process? And actually evaluating it. So the last bit is the trickiest bit, because actually it then turns out that what's really important is, what kind of communicator do you want to be? If you are trying to be challenge-led, and that challenge could be climate, could be water, could be anything. Are you the facilitator that helps that end user group, that community, understand all the different options that are in front of them? You explain what they are the best way, and then you kind of step back and you say, look, that's my job done. You have to make your decision. Or are you the catalyst, who actually job is to narrow down the options, to say, look, there's all these options, but no, I'm a scientist, and this is the option you should go for, and you know, that's the one that you should follow. Or lastly, and arguably, well, no, the most controversial is, are you the activist, the one that's so deeply concerned with this that you're actually going to take action with that community and work with that community to drive change? And that's the one that people feel very most uncomfortable about, because it seems very far away from being that neutral, independent researcher. So I'll just leave you with this one, because I moved from that make and sell area there, making television programs, sending them out, very much one-directional communications, if one direction can even be communication. And then started working in Sense and Respond, working with psychologists, sociologists, visual anthropologists, human geographers, on trying to understand an issue from a whole bunch of different ways, trying to find new ways to kind of communicate around controversial subjects like climate change, geoenergy, disasters. But now what I'm really interested in is the guide and co-create one, that participatory, reflexive, truly interdisciplinary, where you're looking at big, complicated challenges and trying to bring the public in, or the group in, and empower them to make their own decisions based on the knowledge that you've got. So this is a journey. I think I would argue most academics probably are going to start in that bottom left, which is, first of all, you can be a better communicator. You can understand what you've got to do and communicate it much, much better. But I think that, I just wanted to outline that I think for these challenges, I think that drift into the top right is going to be really important. And what will drive that will be your sense of purpose and the sense of purpose of the organization you work for. So I'll leave it there with that provocation. Thanks, Tom.
Iain, thank you very much. Is there a question in the crowd? We can take one. We don't have to, of course. We can save it for later as well. I think we have a lot to digest, so that digestion is happening at the moment.
Digestion, post-lunch digestion.
Thank you very much, Iain. Can leave it over there. Thank you. A very riveting account. I think it's truly inspirational to see that the sky is the limit to who you can be as a communicator and what you can produce as a communicator. And traveling back to that plethora of options, of formats to work within. At the top left, we saw policy reports. And this is going to be a great segue into our second speaker of the afternoon. I'm pleased to present to you Patricia De Clercq, a former project coordinator here at Ghent University, and currently the head of division of the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries of the Flemish government. This study service works in close contact with universities and with research centers for policy advice on topics such as agriculture, environment, and spatial planning. Patricia is here today with us to elaborate on the link between academia and policy. And I invite you to the front.
Good afternoon. Asked to give the government point of view on scientific communication. First of all, I have to say I will not be elaborating on the political point of view on scientific communication. I will do it from the government, from the perspective of a civil servant, of course, because a political point of view, when they make decisions, they do not only use scientific elements, but they also use other elements to make up decisions. Therefore, we as a government official need to be very clear to our political heads what elements that are crucial to make that political decision. Because, first of all, I will introduce my organization. So I'm Patricia. I'm Secretary General of the Department for Agriculture and Fisheries, and we work with our team for the Minister for Agriculture and Fisheries of the Flemish government. And what do? We make policy. We create policy propositions, and then we give these propositions to our minister. We go in discussions with her, and she has to take these propositions to the higher level of the government, and there they make the policy decisions. Afterwards, once the decision is made, we implement that decision, we control it, and of course we also monitor and evaluate it. Therefore, in the whole process of policy making, data and facts or numbers are crucial. Why are they crucial? Because it starts with we want to predict what the outcome of our policy will mean for society. We want to really be aware of the consequences that our policy will make in the society for us, for the farmer, and for us, the fishermen. So that's very important that we can base our policy propositions on these actual facts and figures. Of course, we also want to measure the impact of our policy. So also in the end, we need the data to evaluate and, for example, to make new decisions possible based on those facts and figures. We also want to, of course, make well-considered decisions. So we must map out all possibilities and give the right elements to the minister to make a proper decision. And of course, something that also was put out by Iain, and it's very important for this university. As a government, it's very important that we know about innovations, that we know about new techniques, new elements, so that we as a government can also introduce those new elements to the broader society. Because it's not, if you only keep it at the university level, it will not be implemented in society. So for us as a government, it's good to be aware of new techniques, of new elements, so that we can take it up in our policy. Where do we get our insights? Of course, from scientific data, of course, also from practical insights, from information that we have in our government as well. Who do we ask for this information? Of course, scientific research institutes, such as universities. We also have in Flanders two own governmental research institutes. One here nearby is called ULVO. We also have practice centers in Flanders that are centers that make the fundamental research more on a practical level, so that they can see what does it mean for a farmer if they would implement new techniques. Of course, European platforms, own data collection. We also have an own study service in our organization that does study work, of course, for us. A special element is also the platform for agriculture and food research. That it's quite unique. We have such a platform. There are farmers' organizations, policy makers, but also researchers who come together and talk to each other on a strategic level on different kinds of topics, but together we try to influence policy agendas, but also research agendas on a Flemish, but also on a European level. So it's very important to know each other and to make clear what point of view of the different actors are. One example from our website, it's a very hands-on example. where we put on our website the information that we get from our own data, but also from scientific data on cultivars. These are current cultivars, but also new cultivars with different kind of elements. And it's very important that we as a government, as a neutral partner, put this information in front. We put it on our website, but we also use it in our direct communication with farmers, where we can tell them this based on scientific information, these are the cultivars that you can use on your farm. Choose the one that is most important for you on your farm to use in an economic or in ecological way, like you want to run your farm. So very hands-on information that we disseminate to farmers. Other examples, for instance, is once a year, the European level decides on TAC and quota. TAC is the total allowable catches in the fisheries sector. So for each species in each water basin, we, on a European level, put out those TAC, and every member state can have some quota to fish up in the next year. This TAC and quota decision making is decision making for several months, and it starts with scientific research. Each year we get information from scientists on how population of fish are doing in these basins. And based on that element, we then start negotiations. And of course, in these negotiations, we also put other data on the table, data from member states, data from fishermen, and so on. And at the end, the political decision makers in December on a European level decide where they will differ from the scientific information that was put on the table before the summer holidays. So the whole package starts with scientific information and ends up with a political decision. And in those political decisions, it's often also put on the table that more research has to be done for the next year, also to evaluate how decisions are being put into place and what the effects are. Another example is we are currently having a big discussion with some colleagues on an administrative level on what to do with buffer zones next to water zones. That are zones, buffer zones from 1 to 2 meters or even a tenfold, where a farmer could not use pesticides or fertilizers. But for this discussion, it's very important that we have the right scientific information to convince each other on how broad this buffer zone has to be for environmental purposes. Because if you have a buffer zone from 1 or 2 meters, or a buffer zone from 10 or 20 meters, that has a very big impact on the end user. So as a government, we need also to be very clear about the goals that we set, but also why we set these goals and on what basis we want these goals to be achieved. So scientific information is crucial, not only to convince our colleagues, but also to convince the end user that what we as a government put into place is really well thought, and of course also from their point of view, they can accept it. So what are our elements, how your research can come to us? First of all, we think you need to work on your PR. Don't wait for us to contact you, but contact us if you have information that is important for policymakers. Look for those policymakers in your domain, and that can be on a local level, but also can be on a bigger level. For example, the European Union is also very important to be in touch with on different government in different policy domains. Stay in contact with experts and collaborate also with end users, because as a government, we want facts and figures, but the end user needs also other information to comprehend what science could mean for them in the end. So be aware that the end user and the government needs different kinds of information from you and from your scientific research. Of course, we would like your recommendations to be quite clear. I know that it can't be black or white, but make sure that in your recommendations, you really target the goals that you want to achieve with the science that you produce, and that you can say to us or to other groups, this is what we want to, this is what I researched, and this is what it could mean for you. That could be a policymaker, but could also be another end user. So if it's for policymakers, such as governments, it's very important to have those clear recommendations, because we need to tell our ministers in a very good way what consequences could be provided by their decisions. So if we have clear recommendations from you, we can use them also in our discussions with our political governments. And use, of course, every channel you have to be in contact with your end users. And for the end, be not disappointed if you do not use all your recommendations. As I said at the beginning, policy making is not only scientifically based, it's also based on other elements, on societal elements, on political elements of the moment that are important for a government. So don't be disappointed, and don't let it scare you off from telling us of asking us, why didn't you use it? We can explain, in most cases, I think, why we didn't use some of your recommendations. So ask us and keep on bringing us those information, because it's very important for us. Thank you.
Patricia, thank you very much. A quick gaze into the audience for a possible question. And I once again thank you for this interesting look behind the scenes of the stream from data of research to policy. I think we also have some extra characteristics such as transparency, proactivity that can all be added to that profile of a 21st century researcher. The government is, of course, just one of the strong fingers on the pulse of innovation. Industry is another one, and that brings me to our third speaker of our program here today, Filip Arnaut, R&D Director at Puratos, if you want, a by origin Belgian family business that has grown into a multinational, an international group offering innovative products, raw materials, and application expertise to the sectors of bakery, patisserie, and chocolate manufacturing. Puratos employs 1,000 R&D researchers and technical advisors. And today, Filip will give some insight as to how scientific research and storytelling, another important buzzword for us here today, can lead to scientific impact, to advanced networking, and to collaboration. Filip, I gladly pass the mic.
Thank you, Tom. In the short presentation, I will have two parts. One where we use scientific data to communicate ourselves, and one more on our expectations as industry, how to tap into science. So, Puratos, yes, indeed, we are a global B2B company, and we have this vision that we created. We have been existing for 100 years, and so we were thinking after 100 years, where will we be now the next 100 years? And so the conclusion is we will be on Mars. There will be colonists on Mars. There will be a few million people living there. So also there, we want to serve the people with tasteful products, and so we have to be prepared for that. And that's something that really got into our mind. And more than that, we started thinking about what can we do about that. It's a very long journey. We will not be there next year, but 100 years, it's not so far away. So we have to prepare. And so we started to think about that. And we thought about the challenges of going to Mars. There are a lot of them. So if you imagine Mars, it's not a very, the color is nice, but next to that, there is not a lot of nice things to discover there. And there is a very harsh planet, very harsh environment. So we listed a number of challenges that we have to face if you want to go there. And so what we realized that there is almost no water. There will be limited energy there. There is some solar energy, but also dust storms that are there that will not make it possible to use this solar energy all the time. We will have to be very picky on the crops that we can grow there. There is no land, there is no soil, there is something covering the surface, called regolith, I think. If the expert Iain can confirm. So we will have to be able to do that independently of agricultural land. We will have to make choices so that people have a complete nutrition, that they can live there with limited amount of crops. We will have to recycle everything that is there because it's so precious. And we will have to also connect with the people there by remote sensors, bringing in artificial intelligence to help grow the crops. And of course, in our case also, we have to use very efficient ways of producing that. So if you look at that, yeah, Mars, but it's very similar what we are facing now. So that was the next thing that we realized. This journey to Mars is in fact also a journey that we have now on Earth, facing all these climate changes, limited amount of resources. So we translate that to challenges that we have to solve at the shorter term here on Earth. And that is very much in line with our strategy as a company, where we also want to serve the people here on Earth with nutritious food in a very sustainable way. So that connects the two things together, the vision at the long term and the short term objective that we have. And so this communication around that really gives us a lot of visibility. People are attracted by this fact that we look at such a long future, 100 years. And so we also, the fact that we translated to this challenging journey to Mars, also to challenges here on Earth, really made it very realistic and also tangible. And so we were able to convince partners to work with us, and we set up the Space Bakery project. It's a €6 million project with partners that cover the whole supply chain. So we're working, for instance, with Professor Steppe here from the faculty on the plant sensors, but also with Hasselt University on biochar. We work with Vito. It looks more at the impact of radioactivity, but also the microbiome of the plants. So we had this whole consortium, and the deliverables are not on Mars, but deliverables are here on Earth. We got connections with NASA. We use plants that we obtained from the NASA collection. We are in contact with the Canadian Space Agency. We got the first prize in a presentation on the GLEX Global Space Exploration Conference. And we also had an invitation to go to Dubai and did a presentation there in the Belgian pavilion. So just to say how science can also help us, a company, to differentiate. And the communication that we did around was very impactful. And by the way, we took it a step further. Now we have also our Mars Puradome that will be opening soon, where there is a complete Mars experience, but also next to that, a food tech center where we'll demonstrate very state-of-the-art technologies that now can help us to support our vision of better nutrition and more sustainable production of food. So that's an example from our part, how we built on that as an industry. But next to that, also we want to connect with the science that is going on. So there is a lot of things going on, and we have 1,000 people in technical functions. We have 450 researchers, and of course we are confronted with this science overload. There's a huge amount of publications in different languages all around the world, and not only in our fields. We are of course in food, and this we follow, but this communication is also happening in engineering and toxicology, in everything around climate change. All that is very relevant on the things we are doing. So this is huge. So what do we do? For one thing, well, we do active searches, of course. We have scientists, and they look into Scopus and other databases to find relevant science. This is very, let's say, detailed, very much focused on one topic that we want to explore. And this is okay. Next to that, there are the internal newsletters. So we distribute science that we pick up in internal newsletters. Again, this is very focused in our field. We look for what we really want to look for and what we know. Patent searches has not been mentioned, but I would also like to mention that from industry perspective, patents are a very rich source of information. Of course, it's not peer-reviewed. There is a lot of, let's say, non-verified experiments, but still, the creativity there is very high. So it also gets a lot of visibility, and as a researcher, a patent is also something that is there to stay. You can always refer to that for your curriculum, but also it gives, I think, a personal pride to be able to file for a patent. That's just between brackets. And then there are thematic publications by interest groups that catch our attention, and there are the journals, the scientific journals, but also the trade journals that help us to discover other ways of innovation. And then there are, of course, the communications from the universities. I just want to spend a bit more time on that, to highlight some things. There's, of course, the doctoral thesis. This is the document that you will all deliver after so many years of hard work, and this is a very valuable document. And sometimes we dig into that, or we are invited to be part of the jury, and this gives us also inspiration. I would also like to mention specifically the hybrid opportunity to follow on doctoral thesis. I just mentioned this one that I followed a few days ago, in fact. And this is a very handy way to do it. You can just tap into there. You don't have to spend half a day, but you can still connect directly with the researchers. And also the advantage of these presentations is that mostly, and I would say here in that case, especially also, there was a very convincing, very, let's say, good way of communicating on a very specific topic. It made it very accessible, and I think it's also the objective of this type of presentations. So for us in industry, this is a very interesting way to get access to this type of science. So I hope there's a hybrid way of presenting this doctoral thesis, that this will not disappear. Things that are interesting is that this type of initiatives, the Universiteit van Vlaanderen, where also researchers think about how there is an interest in the consumer level of communication, and how can they really translate their science to something that can interest the broader public. I think this is a very nice initiatives, and the ones that are there are also very relevant. Then there is this type of, you can call it journals or communications by institutes. And this is very interesting from industry perspective, because there the subjects are very broad, and they also open up subjects that we are not really proactively looking for. So they sort of combine different disciplines in this type of journals. And I think there is an important role to play, I think, by universities to set these things up and to invite their doctoral researchers and researchers in general to contribute and to make these things visible. It's not an individual action there to be taken, but it's more an institutional one. And I think this is a very relevant one. And I have to say that based on these, and there are other communications like in France, that they really also incite us to connect and to go and look for collaborations and contacts. So I think this is an important point as well. And here it's journal type, but it's also, of course, these informations are also available online. I think also the alumni can play an important role. I took here an example of an initiative where there is a talk about a specific topic on microbiome. So also there, it brings science more a more accessible level for us in industry. Here I have to say also, it's also important that this type of informations are available without too much hassle. If you have to register, if you have to be become a member, or you have to fill in 23 types of fields, then okay, it stops there, and then you just stop because you next time you don't know the password anymore, and so on. So I think it's very important also for institutes to have very open ways of communicating and being accessible for outside persons. So I think why should you communicate? I think it's something very selfish also for a way that you have to look at it. It's very important, and I think for us it's important that we also, when we hire people, that we hire this type of profiles that also have been working on that and have been taking that into account, because it's a skill that we will need also in our organization, and I'm sure we are not alone. So I think it's important, and it's also important, the make and sell. I just picked it from your presentation yesterday, and that you also mentioned now. I think it's still very relevant, of course, because there has to be communication on what has been done. Solid science is important, and also from industry perspective, we really want to learn about that and indeed fill gaps that we have. So this remains important. I think it's also important to have this feedback on what you're doing. If you are working on specific topic, if you communicate, you can also have feedback and also connect with applied technology. Then again, industry comes in, but this fundamental, more basic work, at the end of the day, I think everybody has this ambition to make it also useful for something. So when you communicate, you can also find these applications, and sometimes I'm sure in corners or in fields that you don't expect. And then attract partners to synergize with complementary labs, and this can be on the work itself, and it doesn't have to be always let's say research or academic labs. It can be industry labs, and then also to look for collaboration internships. We host a lot of interns. We have around 70 per year, and this is also with labs that we can connect with, and that we know that they are doing something that can be of interest to us. So there it's also a two-way advantage, I think, because of course internships bring also back to the lab's knowledge about applications or about certain insights that we might have. Funding, also there, just for the story, when we started this Mars project, the Space Bakery, well, I contacted Professor Stappe. Why? Because she was in the media with her sensors and said, I listen to the trees so I can hear them. So this was something that attracted our attention because we were not in that field. So when we were looking for partners, well, based on that, I was here by accident. I stepped into her office. I said, would you like to work with us? We have a project on going to Mars. They said, okay, great. So let's do it. So you see, sometimes it's these communications that can also initiate this type of collaborations and fundings, because now we have this project together that is funded, by the way, by Flanders Food and by Vlaio, so by the government. And I think this is also something we really appreciate, because it's also it shows that the government is also looking to the future and not only invests in the next, let's say, praline in Flanders, but also looks for the longer term. And then, as I said, you also have to be selfish, because by communication, you create this extra dimension in your CV. It's not only you, top researcher, that is there, but also somebody who communicates, who opens up, who can connect. So I think this is an important aspect. It also allows you to identify alternative career opportunities. If you have in contact with other people who built on your research. Scientific prizes, always nice to have on your CV. So it's also a result of strong communication. And then build your own ecosystem. One of the questions we always have standard in our hiring policy is, okay, what do you bring as network to us? What do you bring? So if you can say, okay, I have this communication, I have this contacts, and we've been there and so on. So I think this is also an important element So communication, I think, yeah, it is something to invest some time in. So I will not go in all the tips that you can find in Dr. Google type of setup, where how you can make presentations and so on. I think there are a lot of things happening on that, depending on the media and so on. So I will not go too much in detail. It was one I want to highlight is about storytelling. So storytelling is very important. I think it makes it really accessible, and there are yeah, formats to do it. It's to who you communicate. Why do you want to talk to this person? Who do you want to reach? So this will determine for a large part also the story that you tell. And then there is the classical storytelling. There has to be a challenge, a bad guy that you want to master. It can be the environment, it can be the climate, it can be some other challenge, and then the journey to do it. So you tell what have you done, what are your hypotheses, and so on, and then success. But I think also failure is very important. It makes you human and accessible, and not just a next to God scientist that can find all the solutions. So it makes it more open to communication. And then the happy ending is also important to get some buy-in. So the results that you got and convincing results. And then, okay, what's next? Episode 2, the cliffhanger. What will happen next? And so that's also an invitation to connect. So this storytelling can really help you to open up and to connect. Then, yeah, these are the basic let's say, advices. It's always to have not too much jargon to use, pictures, only communicate on one result and not make it too complex. And then there is a lot of platforms that you can use. There's the social media platforms. I think in a professional environment, LinkedIn is a really important one. Also blogs. And I think, yeah, so something that is easily accessible, that is not too complex to go to. YouTube and of course now also, yeah, there are a lot of open platforms, of course, to be used. And then you don't stick to one type of medium. Visual is good, text is also good, will address another type of audience, so choose it in function of who you want to reach. So that's it. So thank you. Oops.
Thank you very much, and I'm sorry for setting this trap here. I think for the sake of time that we're going to move to a fourth speaker, but Filip, thank you for these hands-on tips on how to become a positively detectable dot on the radar of non-academic communication. We've already traveled to the Altiplano of Bolivia and the outer space of Mars. We're going to end at the home base of Ghent University with a fourth speaker. Marjolein Vanoppen, a postdoctoral researcher here at the Faculty of Bioscience Engineering, frequently cooperates with companies to make their water cycle more sustainable. She supervises PhD projects in this regard, and she's built up a strong focus on scientific communication with a broad range of output, from publishing books to recording and producing podcasts. She's also the shoulder that the media tap on for any water-related issues. And she's here to share not a presentation, but a personal testimonial, a reconstruction of the ramification of her scientific outputs. Marjolein.
Thank you, Tom. I was not the one that was supposed to be here. For you who've read the program, Marjolein sounds almost the same, but Marjolein fell ill this morning, so I'm filling in for her. So I have no slides. I had about 10 minutes preparation on the way here in the taxi, so apologies if it's not super fluent. But I will try to give you a brief insight into my story and how I became one of those postdocs that tries to dabble into science communication every once in a while. Tom, I'm going to look at you for timing because I have no clue. So keep me updated. I was like you, not too long ago. I started my PhD at this faculty in 2012, finished in 2016. I've been a postdoc here since. And my journey into science communication started somewhere in my bachelor years in written communication, but that was very broad and not very directed. Just I liked writing stuff down and found someone who liked my writing, and we blogged some stuff. But it really kickstarted at the end of my PhD. Here at the faculty, when you submit your PhD, there's this one optional fill-in form that says, do you have anything to communicate that would interest a broader audience? I'm not sure if that's still there, or maybe it's mandatory now. That would be good. But I filled it in, and then Sylvie, I think, contacted me, and she said maybe we should write a press release. It sounded a bit scary, the press. And I didn't want any journalists knocking on my door, trying to explain to them how my research was going. But I did do some research into energy efficient, or energy neutral, as we call it, seawater desalination. That was about 1/3 of all of my chapters in my PhD, so it wasn't nearly everything, but it was the thing that I thought people might be interested in. So we wrote a little story, and we released the press release, I think, somewhere right after my public defense. And that same day, I got a call, a number I didn't know, and I picked up because Sylvie rightfully had told me, like, they might contact you, just make sure you're available. Lesson number 1, when media contacts you, be flexible and be available, because they're on a tight schedule. And if you say, no, maybe tomorrow, they'll probably not going to call you back anyway. But before I knew it, they said, yeah, we'll be there in an hour with a filming crew. Can you be ready, and can you show us something? Sure. So I remember sitting there and trying to figure out what I was going to do. And then I went into the office of some of my colleagues, and I went, look, I know my setup is not set up at the moment, but please help me get this arranged. Someone print our logo and our groups, like the university logo and whatever, so we have it in the visual and everything. And I had a few colleagues help me set everything up, and it was ready by the time the filming crew got there. And lesson number 2, to them it doesn't really matter if it works the way it's supposed to work. At some point, so I work in water technology, by the way. I do a lot of water technology related research. So I have pumps and water and membranes and stuff like that. And at some point there were some air bubbles in one of the beakers, and they're not supposed to be there, but it looks nice on camera. So they asked me to make more bubbles. I tried to explain to them that was not the purpose of what was going on, but it looked good on camera, so we made more bubbles. And yeah, that was basically my first connection to media. There was actually 2 film crews that passed by that day. I was exhausted by the end of it. And that's how it kind of all got started. I was also asked to write a little article, or no, a journalist interviewed me for an article for the newspaper. And a few weeks or a few months later, I was contacted by the Universiteit van Vlaanderen, which Filip also mentioned. And they asked me if I wanted to do a video with them on seawater desalination. And when you do one of these, it's connected to one of our radio stations. So they also call you for an interview and things like that. And then your name kind of gets out there. One of the things Hilda asked me to talk about today was my experiences with media. So this is how I got involved in it. And I do want to give you a few tips if journalists are people you want to get in contact with, or you get in contact with through your work. And my experience with that, and while driving here, not while driving, while someone was driving me, I typed some stuff on my phone that I wanted to tell you. And one I already mentioned, and that's when working with journalists, it's important to be flexible, or with working with news in general. What's news right now cannot be news in an hour because something else happens, or in a day. If a journalist calls you and about a message you really want to get out there, you have to be flexible. I was once called to be on, I forgot the name of the TV show again. Tom, help me out. What did I tell you before? The Afspraak. I rarely watch TV, especially that late at night, so I'd never seen the show. They called me at 2 in the afternoon asking me if I could be in Brussels by 5:30 so I could be in the show that evening. At that point, I was in the lab looking like I'm looking right now, which is not ready to be in front of an audience, let alone in front of a TV camera. But it was something I was passionate about. It was on water issues in Flanders. I'm not going to go into details, but I said yes. I got on my bike. I went to the center of Ghent. I went to a clothing store there and told them, look, I have to be on TV tonight. Help me out. So they helped me. The bottom part doesn't matter. Just wear pants. Tip number 4. Dresses are hard with microphones. Just wear pants. They helped me find the blouse that was suitable for TV and everything. I went to Brussels. I died a little bit inside because the afspraak is not live, but nearly live. They have like half an hour between taping it and it being on air. So that was nerve-wracking. But I did get my message out. I maybe wasn't as confident I was hoping I would be. I was next to like the presenter and the Minister of Environment or something. So that's very scary. But it was a very cool experience, one that I wouldn't have had if I wasn't as flexible in answering their question. Which, by the way, a little bit of a sidetrack. You can see I didn't prepare this. But don't underestimate the something that Filip also mentioned, the opportunities these kind of things bring with them as well. One of the people that was also in the show was the current Minister for Environment, Koen something at that point. I'm very bad at politics as well. But I knew who he was, I knew what he was doing. And he actually was also the mayor of Puurs. I live in Sint-Niklaas. I came there by train, usually what the TV station then does, which sounds very exuberant, but they will order you a taxi to go home. I think it's happened twice now that I went from Brussels to Sint-Niklaas by taxi, that luckily I did not have to pay for myself. But I saw an opportunity because he's a minister, he has a driver. He was going there anyway. So I took a deep breath and I told him, look, you're the Minister for Environment. We want to be sustainable. We should carpool. So I spent an hour in a car with the minister, and a few weeks later I was at his cabinet with one of my colleagues explaining to him what we do, what our research group does, what our research center does. So by being flexible, by taking up this opportunity, I actually managed to get into the office of one of our ministers. So that was, I'm pretty proud of that. I'm not sure if it made any change, but at least it felt like I was making them aware of the research we were doing, and they now knew who we were, and it was at least a first contact there. Another tip or another thing I always try to do when in interviews or with journalists is don't just let them ask the questions, make sure you also ask questions. What is your audience? Who are you talking to? I mean, most of the newspapers I know, but not everyone that interviews me, I know what their audience is. Ask beforehand which questions they're going to ask. If they call you for an interview, okay, do you have like a broad idea of what you want to ask me about? So that if I want numbers or facts, I can look them up beforehand. I don't prepare my questions. I don't write down the answers I'm going to give. But if I want numbers or facts, then I can look them up beforehand. Another thing I also always do is ask them if I can read what they wrote afterwards. They're not the experts. They interview on a billion different topics. They can't be the experts. You can't expect them to be, which is why it's always good to fact check afterwards. I don't rewrite their text. I just check their facts and see if they quoted me more or less right. And a third thing I always keep in mind when dealing with media in general is let go of the nuance. Don't think that sounds great, and it's very, 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 I think this is by far the most difficult part as a scientist in science communication and in media. But focus on your message, not on the details. When you write a scientific article for a journal, you want a high impact factor, you want it to reach the scientific community, or you give a presentation at a conference, feel free to add in all the nuance you want and all the details and all the nitty-gritty, but you can't do that when talking to journalists because you'll lose them in an instant. I think that's my main points when it comes to media. Continuing on with my own journey, based on that Universiteit van Vlaanderen movie and the articles and whatever, I started getting requests for speaking engagements. And to this day, especially in this period of the year, about once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, there's an evening or an afternoon where I'm in front of an audience. It's usually between 20 to 100 retired people. I hope when I'm retired one day I will be at these events as well. And they asked me to speak about my work and water, etc. In the beginning, I would mainly talk about my own research and the seawater desalination and how that works. And I think I was pretty good at explaining it in their terms, how that worked. But then based on the questions and the feedback I started getting, my focus shifted over the years. And today, my main topic when it comes to scientific communication is on drinking water. Something which I'm kind of involved in on a day-to-day basis. We do work with drinking water companies. But what I talk about to my audiences and what I actively communicate about is not my core research, not anymore. My background obviously helps. I'm in water, water technology. But the questions that they started asking me at first, I didn't always have an answer. Is our drinking water safe? Are there antibiotics in it? Are there drugs in it? All these types of questions. And I started realizing this is what they want to know. This is what the public interests. This is how I can use my skill as a scientist, as a communicator, to change the narrative a bit. Because in Belgium, in Flanders, there's still a lot of prejudice when it comes to our drinking water. We are so privileged in having perfectly drinkable, safe water coming out of our tap when we open it, and there's still a lot of people that prefer dragging plastic bottles home from the shop instead of using their tap water. So today, that's my focus when it comes to my science communication, although it started out very differently. And I focus on that in many different ways. Media still calls me. It was very quiet last year because it rained a lot. The years previous to that, there was many more calls when it was very dry, which was okay. I'm also always honest with them. I ask them what their questions are beforehand because I've had to redirect them. Some journalists wanted to interview me on groundwater, sorry, but not my expertise. I referred them to Professor Huismans at the VUB, who knows a lot more about that than I do. So also know what you're comfortable talking about. I think that's very important. And today I still do the speaking engagements. Media calls me. I write something every once in a while, but only when asked. But a few years ago, I started dabbing into a form of media that I was very passionate about. It wasn't very well known here in Belgium at that point, and that's podcasts. I live in Sint-Niklaas, so I came here before COVID. I was on the train 2 hours a day. No, 1 hour a day. Traveled 2 hours a day, more or less. And I listened to podcasts on my way. And I was like, look, this medium is very underexplored here in Belgium. Aren't there any opportunities to do something with that and water? And during the Ghent Science Communication Inspiration Afternoon, there's one every year, normally beginning of July, I think. I talked to Pieter Blomme, who works at the Artevelde Hogeschool in Ghent, and he's a podcasting expert. It's a very fun podcast, by the way, called Relaas. It's all about storytelling. And we got to talking, and the year after, he invited me to follow his 1-week course on podcasting. So I convinced my boss, my professor, that it was important and that we should spend the money for me to go to the podcasting course, which I did, which was also intimidating because I was surrounded by journalists. I was the only scientist there. They talked in a lot of jargon that half of the time I didn't understand. But it did help me a lot in formulating a concept for a podcast that got my message across, but would also be listened to. Because I had the help of people who knew nothing about my subject but were interested in it, and they helped me come up with a concept that would actually reach the audience that I wanted to reach. And that's something else. A lot of people said it today. Know your audience, know who you want to reach. And I found the 3 steps that Iain was talking about very interesting. I very much started from that make and sell perspective, but I feel like I'm more in the second segment now, where I listen to what people want and how I can best reach them and how I can work together with other people to help me reach them. And that comes across a lot in this podcast, where I realized I know who my target audience is. My target audience is my dad. He's this 50-something Flemish guy who has a vague interest in science but knows nothing about it. He's in IT. He has prejudices that make no sense at all. He doesn't watch YouTube. He listens to the radio. He watches TV. He reads a newspaper every once in a while. So we made it very easy on ourselves when we made the podcast. I made the podcast with my dad. So that was a lot of fun to do, and it really helped me. The podcast is made with me, my dad, and other experts in the water community. But because of my dad being involved, it really helped me ground it and stay close to my audience, because he would ask me questions whenever I started talking, and I would ramble on about, yeah, but this is how this works. And he would go, wait, what's that word? What did you say? And he would really force me to take a step back and then make sure my audience would understand what I'm saying. And then one last project that I'm very proud of, and I've kind of been dreaming of since I was a little kid. I've always loved reading. One of my dreams was to one day write my own book. When I was a kid, I was sure it would be about, I don't know, dinosaurs or some kind of fairy tale. I loved reading Harry Potter, so maybe a Wizarding World or something. It turned out to be a book on water. 2 years ago, Toon Verlinde, another communication expert who gives courses. The floor is yours, might sound familiar to some of you. We knew each other. He's also a scientist as a background. And he asked me, look, I really want to write a book. Water seems interesting. Are you in? And last year we published a book on the water cycle in Flanders. And I'm very proud to say that it's on its second print, second edition now. So I'm very proud of that. It's a lot of fun to have this. Okay, the first book you ever have in your hands that you're very proud of with your name on it is your PhD. But this is also pretty cool. Maybe something to end my talk with. Not everyone is cut out for science communication. Some of my closest colleagues are wonderful scientists, a million times better than I am, but don't put them in front of an audience because they'll lose. I know some of my colleagues are following today, so you know who I'm talking about. They're great scientists, but not everyone is cut out for science communication. If you're passionate about it, if you want to get your work out, if you want to start in communication, find where you're comfortable. Writing texts is easy, it's comfortable, but it's not how you reach the biggest audience. I'm not a YouTuber. The whole vlogging thing, not my thing. But maybe it is for you. I like to talk, as you may have noticed while I'm standing here. So podcasting is really my thing. I really like making podcasts. I really like doing it. Based on the one I have now, I'm starting to help other people start up their podcasts and think about it. Maybe working with kids is your thing. Maybe you can try to get into schools and give workshops there. Maybe an older audience is more your thing. But you don't know that without finding out. So 2 final tips: get out of your comfort zone. When I had to give my first presentation as a PhD student, I was so nervous. My professor actually asked me if I was going to be okay, if I needed some fresh air. But I loved it. I kept on presenting, and I can honestly say when Hilde called me to be here today, 2 hours before I had to be here, I'm not nervous doing these kind of things anymore, which to some people I know sounds incredible, because for me that would have been the same case a few years ago. But get out of your comfort zone, do it, get the experience and get out there. And the second thing is have fun with it. No matter how late in the evening I have a speaking engagement, I can go there and be exhausted from my working day and come out of it with so much energy, because it's something that I love to do. It's something that I have fun doing. And if you find the fun in the communication that you do, you get energy out of it, and you get the motivation for the next project or the next Science Communication Challenge coming up. I hope I made a little bit of sense. I hope I gave you some tips that will help you, and good luck on your own journeys.